Scared Stiff Part 2. The world kept spinning outside the cold gray walls, and with every day he spent away from Jimmy, Robert could truly feel himself dying inside. People would look at him through narrow slitted gazes, sizing him up, for what, he wasn't quite sure, but their gazes left him cold and nauseated every time he saw them. Robert's saga really began 25 years ago. Robert's dad was a military man who was wounded in the war. He was honorably discharged and quickly found a job with a security company shortly after leaving his military lifestyle and career behind him. Thomas was Robert's father. He had a wife and one young son. His biggest happiness came from watching his son Robert growing up. Thomas provided a loving family and was well respected by everyone in the community he lived in. He and his family had many friends and acquaintances to help with little odds and ends. There seemed to be no end to the number of people who wanted to show they cared for the man who dedicated himself to his country. Thomas's family really wanted for nothing. He had everything set up to give them love and provided them with everything they could ever want. Things were going smoothly, and Robert was progressing nicely in grade school and into high school. He had gone from being a curious tot with dark hair and bright green eyes to a young man eager for a future that was, by all accounts, looking bright. When Robert entered 11th grade, he first encountered other students who sold drugs, but he never was interested. His father had encountered some people during his time in the war who had started using and abusing drugs to cope with the pain they felt as a result of their injuries. Robert remembered listening to his father's stories, sitting wide-eyed at his father's knee, and promised with all the seriousness of a 9-year-old that he would never do anything like that. But the pull of wanting something more grips every teenager at some point, and Robert was no different. When some of his peers told him he could make good money, Robert found he was considering what they were telling him, in spite of his father's teachings. Robert was a teenager who was growing fast and wanted things that teenagers want: a car, stereo system, and many other goods that his friends had. Robert's father was not rich and could not afford to get his son a car and the other extras his son desired. It was only a matter of time that Robert became jealous of his friends. Robert knew he would have to work almost forever to get a car with his current job at the grocery store, that did not even include any insurance, and he knew that was going to be really expensive, given he was younger than 25 years old. As time went on, Robert grew impatient with not having the many things he saw his friends have, and it was getting to him daily. After having a long talk with his father, Robert realized that he was going to have to take things into his own hands. Thomas told his headstrong son there was no way he and his mother could afford to help him buy a car, as there was barely enough money left over at the end of every month to cover rent, groceries, and the few extras they actually needed. It took a lot of thinking, but Robert knew he had to do something he never thought he would do. The next day, it was with a heavy heart that Robert talked to a couple of kids who he knew dealt drugs. He found himself making a deal to sell for them and extend their customer base. Before he started making any sales, Robert found he was already counting the money he could make, and he was practically feeling the wad of cash in his pocket. When Thomas saw his son bring home a new stereo system, he figured his son got a new job after school. After all, a clerk in a grocery store didn't make much money, so he paid it no mind. But, when Robert drove home in a new Corvette some weeks later, he became convinced his son's new job was more sinister than a simple clerical job. Thomas was sure his son was now involved in something that may be illegal. He asked his son point blank if he was involved in something illegal. Though he could have and done so credibly, Robert didn't lie to his father. Thomas was heartbroken. Thomas had told his son from the time he was 3, how dangerous drugs were and to stay away from anything or anyone that had anything to do with drugs. Robert always agreed with his father and promised that he would never get involved. Now, Robert was admitting to his father he was dealing drugs, and even though he was not himself taking drugs, he was still helping others get high. Thomas listened to what his son told him and remained firm in his teachings to his son. He laid it on the line. He told Robert that if he should get caught, and the chances were good, he would not help him if he should get caught and thrown in jail. It was only a matter of time before Robert found a new customer and was making what he thought to be a big drug deal when he heard the sirens. The man making the deal was a drug informant working undercover, and before Robert knew exactly what was happening, he was face down on the pavement, feeling an officer's hard knee digging into the small of his back. It was no use fighting anymore, he was caught, and he knew he was in significant trouble. Gritting his teeth, he called his father from jail.